Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested, and last week I was able to play test Eve Valkyrie. It's a space shooter that's made for virtual reality. It was actually one of the first VR games we saw with the Oculus Rift. And they just announced that anyone who's going to pre-order the Oculus next year will also get a copy of Eve Valkyrie. The game's a lot of fun, so let's get right to my play test and interview with the game developers, and I'll share some impressions with you afterward. So I'm here with Andrew Willans, lead game designer for Eve Valkyrie, and what are you guys showing off today with Eve?
We have got our pre-alpha build of the game with us today. So this includes all the PvP modes that we've chatted about. There's a couple of different PvP modes that we've been playing today, but also the PvE content as well. So we're showing off the Chronicles, which includes 3 modes for kind of solo play.
Eve Valkyrie, primarily a multiplayer game, one of the first VR experiences, all the way kind of following along the trajectory of the Oculus. Absolutely. From those first, just rotational demos to now the positionally tracked ones.
Yeah.
What's the scope of the multiplayer? How many players versus how many players? And
well, we're still kind of hammering out the details of that. In the studio, we're kind of having 10 on 10, so like 20, and it's it's fantastic. It's epic out there.
And the environments are massive. It's giant space battles.
Yeah, exactly, giant space battles. The objectives as well, which kind of focus the action at different points. And so it's 10v10s where we're at the minute. We don't know exactly what the final figure is going to be, and we'll probably communicate that closer to launch, because really it just comes down to optimization and all of those things.
So what we're seeing today, you're showing 3 classes of ships.
That's right. Yeah. So we have 3 base kind of core classes to the game, and they are the fighter class, the heavy class, and the support. So they're effectively like, if you wanted to put it in a more traditional FPS style formula, it would be, your assault, your medic, and your tank, for want of a better word.
Yeah, and the maps are really big, different environments. You have asteroid fields, you have these space stations. Both teams are coming out from these giant carrier ships.
Absolutely.
How big is that world?
I couldn't give you it in square meters. I could probably get one of our level designers to send you the exact fact. They're big, but it needs to be big enough to accommodate the action, but it also needs to have focal points for the action. Mm-hmm. And what is important is having a central structure or something which is prominent within the level to call it out. So one of the levels we have is called Cathedral, because there's this giant cathedral-like structure in the center, and at least that provides a focal point. Because when you are in VR and you're kind of looking around, you've got all of this degree of movement. There's so many things to keep track of. It's good to have something that's really prominent within the scene, which kind of goes, oh, where am I at? Oh, yeah, I'm on the underside of the cathedral. Okay, I know exactly where that is, and I'll fly to help you out. So it's good to have lots of key visual references within the maps. So they are big, but hopefully they are the right size for the amount of players.
There are focal points where players can kind of gravitate around, also individual areas where players can have skirmishes, or if you're good at dogfighting, you can fly around those places.
Totally, and that's an important part of it, is having the right cover. Having cover so that we've got countermeasures there. So when you hear someone's got a missile lock on you, it's like woo woo woo, what do I do? And then it's like press your countermeasures, and that'll take out a volley of missiles. Mm-hmm. But there's a cooldown on that. There's a trade-off. So say you've fired your countermeasures, and then you hear another volley of missiles inbound. It's like, well, what do I do? And then it comes down to how do I use the terrain effectively? How can I do a kind of zero-G turn round an asteroid, and hopefully the missiles will hit the asteroid rather than your ship.
There's also a control point game mode where you're with a kind of flag-based system as opposed to just hovering around. What are you doing?
Yeah, well, what we've got there is we wanted to do an objective-based game mode, but what was important is that with a lot of traditional kind of control style kind of modes, domination style modes, that you kind of end up camping the objective, but we wanted to keep people kind of engaged in combat and feel free to kind of continue the fight without having to specifically camp a point. So the idea idea was that we came up with was that you deploy a drone basically to do the camping for you. So it was about getting to the control point, which is like a power station, like this big satellite power station. You deploy a drone, and then that's kind of going to draw the power, and basically, that's going to get your scoring increased, and then that frees you up to kind of move around the environment and continue fighting. And then you get the other trade-off of there's something else to shoot. So, you'll see enemy drones, and you'll see like a red laser line which connects it to the objective point, and it's kind of like, all right, cool. And if you remove their drones, obviously that cuts off their power supply.
Now, being a VR game, it's very different developing this than a traditional space-based shooter or any aerial shooter, 360 shooter. The canvas is bigger. You're talking about 360. You're encouraging people to look around for target locking.
Yes.
How does that change, for example, like the sense of scale and where you want people to focus on?
Yeah, focus is it's a weird issue because with one of our missions, Convoy, we had this huge Titan appear from Eve, and it's like Death Star size. It's like this planet that almost appears and charges a beam up, and people still missed it. So at the end of this experience, there was like this huge, massive kind of explosive event, and people were kind of, did you see the Titan? They're like, oh, where was that? And we can't take the player's hand too much in VR. We can't certainly take the camera as well, which is a big no-no. You never kind of remove that camera. You are the camera. And so we try to do a lot of things, like we try to call things out. We'll amplify it with exaggerated visuals in places. We'll use UI, and flare up UI and try and get your attention. Yeah, visual cues, and we have a lot of cues within the actual terrain as well. But even the feedback of, say, when you're under missile lock, you've got to amplify that because you've kind of got this cockpit all around you, but what you're really focused on is just outside. It's just beyond the cockpit.
It's something I noticed.
And then you can, oh, right, there's all these instrumentations, there's these panels, and they're not really important. So the important thing is trying to get the feedback in so that it just feels subtle. It's in the background. You're aware of the fact there's a missile coming, but you're not specifically looking at a counter. And that's why you'll see, there'll be red lights flash, and there'll be kind of UI that's projected onto the shields, onto the side of the ship, and you'll get haptic feedback as well. So it's audio, visual, and haptic, and a combination of all three things to really kind of emphasize something in VR.
Do you find the HUD is less effective in VR than it would be if you're just playing on a monitor?
Well, it's actually way more effective in VR. Our HUD, sorry, the HUD. So I thought you said hub.
No,
the HUD, definitely. I think, that's a big challenge within VR is actually calling out features within the HUD.
And that's where the near field is. That's where actually with 3D has the best effect.
Yeah. But it's bizarre. It's just past that cockpit, And I think because you're so focused on the target, what really matters is firing those Gatling guns, and the thing that really matters is the missile locks, and whatever weapon you're using, you're really focused on the reticule, you're focused on the target, and that's it's a fun kind of trait within VR that it puts these different problems, as a designer, that you've got to kind of come over the less traditional problems that you normally face with game design. And that's one of the things that drove us to do the look-to-lock missiles. We'd see a lot of people in VR, and they weren't looking around. They were kind of just still playing it and quite focused and fixed like this.
It's a kind of immersion.
Yeah, and because there's a lot to take in, and you're kind of going, oh, wow, yeah. But how do you get people to move around? And that kind of drove the design of the look-to-lock missiles. So if you suddenly say to someone, oh, well, you visually have to maintain a lock with a target, that's going to increase your chances of hitting it if you're following it with your eyes. And so you're tracking it, and then you've got this reticule, and it's been tremendously effective, and it's definitely one of the wow things that's totally unique to VR. This is not something that you can do in 2D. It's
and it's something you don't want to necessarily overdo. In your testing, I mean, sure, you could do a lot of things with head tracking and head movement, but what is it? Is the pace of the game change, or?
Yeah, we kind of that pace, the velocity of the ships, that trade-off's all quite finely balanced, and it's been nuanced over a period of months and years. But yeah, it does take a lot to get that balance perfect.
And you have to make it fun, but also comfortable.
Yes.
So, like the game duration, like how long are people playing in these games? Wearing the headsets?
Huge amounts of time, which is really surprising. I invited my brother and my friends into the office, and we sat down and had a gaming session. It's the first time they had ever tried VR, and I think we were in for around about 3 hours, and that was their very first session.
Non-stop.
Yeah, non-stop. I think maybe they lifted it to have a bite of pizza and a sip of Coke, and then but just non-stop. and some of the pre-alpha players that we've got, which are helping us kind of balance the values in the game, they just go all night. If we put a server up, they'll be on it, and they'll be on it until the server goes down. It's incredible.
So you really have reached that point where the comfort level and the frame rate and the amount of information that you're throwing at people.
I think the hardware is no longer an issue. When you've got kit like this, it's really down to the devs, to make sure that experience is as awesome as possible in VR. And it's comfortable as well.
Right, and there's also customization you can do, but text, for example, in VR is a little challenging because how it's resolved.
Yeah.
So how do you create menus you want to keep in the game, navigating through upgrading their ships, choosing their loadouts?
Absolutely, and we had a kind of a UI built around this interface for like the main menus and stuff, and we actually went back to the drawing board on it because it just wasn't wow enough, and so we took the time to kind of step back and go, we need something that's going to be, oh my God, VR has landed, and that's why we went back to what we have now, which is, it's like this, the main concept behind it was being in the middle of like when you go to a planetarium or an observatory or something like that, and having the stars around you so that you're actually part of this star chart. And one of the other things that people say is, if you're going to look at something, you should always put a reticule to show where the player's looking. And this is one of those kind of like best practice rules, which we, for the most part, have broken with ours, because we're doing it almost like augmented reality within VR. So how when you see Google Glass and people look around and there's this meta information that kind of appears on stuff that they're looking at, we kind of took that approach with our menus so that we're in there and we have all of these things, and as you look at them, the meta information just kind of pops up and it tells you what it is, and we have audio cue, we have a visual cue, it illuminates, so it's obvious where you're looking, and then it's up to you. You just press A to select. So you basically just look at what you want and press A, and just press B to go back. And so we're still refining that at the minute, but it's pretty awesome.
And it works with gamepad, obviously. That's going to come with the Oculus. You guys are also doing a version for console.
Yes.
Is there also HOTAS and keyboards, mouse support?
Yeah, there was a big kind of push from the community, the pre-alpha community, saying, "Oh, we want HOTAS support," and I think everyone wanted that feel of having a flight stick. So yeah, we've got support for that, and we've still got some time left in development. I think we'll support as much as we can before we hit the streets.
On the PC side, if you have a super high-end PC, is it scalable? Can you add more graphic detail, high resolution textures, or how much customization, I guess, can you do?
For launch, we've kind of got a plan, and we know exactly what we're delivering for launch, and then beyond that, we'll see. But in terms of graphics card and the graphic settings, depending on different cards and stuff, we'll probably publish that a little bit later, a little bit closer to release, because I think we're still ironing all of that out at the minute.
And you guys are timing this for when the Oculus comes out?
Absolutely, yeah. When Oculus launches, we'll be there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thanks a lot.
So Eve Valkyrie, it was a ton of fun. A few takeaways from the playtest experience. We played for about an hour and the time went by really fast. I didn't realize how quickly the games were going. It was super comfortable. That's both a testament to the new hardware, the consumer version of the Oculus that they're using, and also the design of the game, the pace of the game. Never once did we have to take off our headsets to go through the menus. Everything was done in the headset, in VR. But like my conversation with Andrew, something that I took away was that the HUD in the game wasn't really useful. The cockpit, all the controls, because it's an action-based shooter. Unlike when I play Eve or Elite Dangerous, for example. In Eve, I'm not constantly looking at that virtual cockpit. I'm looking at the action focused in the screen and in space. So all of the 3D effects, that near-field effects of VR, where I can look at the cockpit, look up to the controls, look up to the indicators, that stuff all faded away. And it'll be interesting, that balance of how much of the space they want to reveal versus how much of the cockpit they want to use in the game, because the cockpit actually makes you feel like you're in a spaceship, but it actually takes away from my visibility in the battle. The maps were also fun. There wasn't collision damage, so at least in the game modes I was playing, I was able to bump into asteroids, bump into the space stations, and not get damaged. So And it's not perfect Newtonian physics like in Elite Dangerous. It's way more of an arcade shooter, but it was very easy to play. The gamepad worked great. Can't wait to try it with joystick and throttle. The menu systems work really well. Everything was readable, and it looks like it's gonna be a lot of fun. We played in a 5v5 session in this demo, but the game will support 10v10, and Andrew did tell me that they're exploring the possibility of cross-platform multiplayer experiences with the PlayStation VR. It's technically possible, but they couldn't say whether that would be happening yet. But Eve Valkyrie comes out next year with the Oculus, and like I mentioned earlier, they did announce today, anyone pre-ordering the Oculus Rift would get a copy of Eve Valkyrie as well. So that's really exciting. Lots of games coming out for virtual reality, lots of interesting lessons learned, lots of playtests coming up. CES is right around the corner, so can't wait to play more of those games. But until then, stay tuned on Tested, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time. Bye.